Welcome to Engaging Creativities, Art in the Pandemic. I'm Julia Wright, President of the Academy of the Arts and Humanities in the Royal Society of Canada. I'm also a member of the Royal Society's COVID-19 Task Force. I'm grateful to be speaking today from Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The Royal Society of Canada is hosting this event, and its offices are located in the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. From coast to coast to coast, we are grateful to and acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit and the First Nations and Métis peoples, and the dozens of languages and cultures that enrich what many call Turtle Island. I encourage all of you joining us in this virtual space to take a moment to reflect on the land on which you rest and the obligations we all share in the spirit of reconciliation to acknowledge the harms of the past and the present and find a path towards a respectful and collaborative future. Once again, welcome and thank you all for joining us tonight. There were more registrations than we anticipated, and it's been marvelous to see the interest in this event, first for the Royal Society. We encourage everyone to leave their cameras on if you're comfortable and your internet connection can sustain it, and remind you all that this event is being recorded and will be posted on the RSC website. Tonight's event emerges out of the working group on artistic responses to COVID-19, led by Sean Caulfield. It is one of the 20 or so working groups proceeding under the umbrella of the Royal Society of Canada's COVID-19 Task Force, led by Tom Mary. The task force objective, first and foremost, has been providing evidence and expertise to support leading us all through and beyond the pandemic to a more equitable, sustainable, healthy, and resilient future in which we not only live, but live better. While there are task forces, committees, and science tables across Canada working hard on critical pieces of public health response, the RSC Task Force has been thinking holistically of the lessons we can learn about mental health, information literacy and accuracy, inequality, the economy, and public institutions, from schools to long-term care facilities, to enhance our collective capacity to keep all of us safe and well. It is in this context that the task force created the working group behind tonight's website launch. Culture is not an extra or mere entertainment. The arts and creative research help us to process and bear witness to the transformations of the last year. They give us other spaces in which to think and feel for a time apart from the everyday world. They give us solace and connection. They give us context, and they allow us to see in different perspectives. They also give us opportunities to explore tough questions, to stare failure in the face, to consider consequences, to acknowledge mourning, to imagine new possibilities, and to embrace hope. And this is why the Royal Society of Canada Task Force on COVID-19 created a working group on the creative arts. I'll turn things over in just a moment to Sean Caulfield, the chair of the working group. But before I do, I want to thank him and the amazing RSC staff, especially Russ McDonald, for organizing tonight's event. And I'll give you all a few procedural notes too. We will have 4 presentations tonight, and I'll introduce each one. After the presentations are over, we'll have time for Q&A, including time for any artists here who want to talk about their own work. To ask a question, we'll ask you to please use either the raise your hand option or reactions on the bottom of your screen in Zoom, or send a message via the chat to Q&A. If you go into the chat and click personal message to look for a queue, that'll help you find it. When we take questions, you'll be able to ask on camera, or if you wish, submit it through the chat. I'll remind everyone of this again after the presentations. But now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Sean Caulfield, Centennial Professor in the Department of Art and Design at the University of Alberta. Over to you, Sean.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's great to see such a great group, and it's great to be here. I'd also like to start by acknowledging I'm here at the University of Alberta, and the University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the history, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. So I'll try to keep my comments brief because I think it'd be good to get over to the presentations and more dialogue. But I do want to start with some thanks. Again, I want to thank the hard work of the Royal Society, of the larger COVID Task Force, and all the support they've given for this project. I also want to acknowledge the support of the University of Alberta that helped to fund this project. I'd like to thank the working group for their help and support. I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of Christian Dendy, who was the designer for the project. I think he did a terrific job, and very grateful for his hard work. And of course, I want to thank all the contributors to the site, the artists, curators, writers, and everyone who who submitted things for the project. It's just great to see all the work, and I really appreciate all of it. I want to also say, over the years, I've had lots of experience putting together exhibitions in, the kind of physical gallery space. This is my first time trying to do something like this online, and it was a learning curve for me. So thank you all. There were moments when I definitely fumbled a bit, and I appreciate your patience as I, work through all that. So thank you. So just a few brief thoughts on the site itself. As Julie was noting already, we all know that art and creative research plays a vital role in helping us to understand the world in which we live. And maybe even more so in times of crisis, right? The pandemic forced Canada to deal with so many complex and difficult challenges. First and foremost, of course, was the terrible loss of life that happened as a direct result of COVID-19, right? But then a whole other set of difficult problems that arose in relation to other health issues. There was, of course, a huge economic impact. And of course, this had ripples effects on all sorts of social and political things. And all sorts of other problems relating to isolation and schooling, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this complexity is difficult to navigate, of course. And, there's an emotional element interwoven with the pandemic that can be difficult to articulate. And I think art is uniquely placed to help us understand this. Likewise, creative practices have an important role to play in helping us understand the world through creative research practices, and often partnering with other disciplines, but working more in an isolated way as well. Art also plays an important role in knowledge translation and in advocacy, as well as in the realm of activism, underscoring social justice issues that have arisen in various ways because of the pandemic. And I think finally, art also plays an important role in fostering a rich inner life that enables us to have the capacity to reflect in meaningful ways about all the challenges that were brought up because of the pandemic. One of the things I'm pleased about, which I think is great about the site, is that I think it reflects a lot of this diversity in relationship to the themes that we've been thinking about in relationship to all these problems. And I also think it echoes the exploration and research that the larger COVID task force is engaged with. So I think that's great. The site has works that explore themes of isolation, themes of loss, other works that deal with family life and with schooling, works that tackle the difficult questions around racism that arose because of the pandemic. The site also explores how creative practice itself has been transformed and how do we respond to making work in this kind of situation. Other work explored in interesting ways what we're doing right now. What does it mean to be on Zoom 8 hours a day, right? So that's really interesting. And then I think there are other works that were more introspective, and provided a space of contemplation, which was just equally important. I think another great thing about the site is that there is a range of generational experience, from emerging artists to established artists, and we'll see that in some of the talks tonight. So I won't go on much longer, but I thought what I might quickly do, I'm sure you've all seen the site, but just in case you haven't, you can all see that, I hope. So again, I think really well designed and pleased with how wonderful it looks. And just wanted to note that there's so much great work on the site, as you can see here. And of course, in the spirit of time, we couldn't have everyone speak, but later, after our sort of more formal presentations, if people do want to talk about work, I'm happy to go back. If you don't want to share your screen, I can share your screen and sort of navigate through to share work if needed. The other thing I wanted to say was just to underscore, of course, that I hope this is just a start. I mean, we have lots of great work on this site, but hopefully this event and the life of over the life of this kind of a website, more work can come in. So please do share this. Of course, there's ways that people can continue to submit, and hopefully this project continues to grow and we continue to have more dialogue about this important issue. So I'll stop sharing for now. Just to wanted to share one last thing, and many of you already know this, but if you haven't heard the good news already, the Engaging Creativity site will be featured in the 2021 Congress, so Congress 2021 of the Humanities and Social Sciences. So this is terrific news. As many of you know, this is a very large event with lots of participants. So this will mean the site gets lots of attention, and I think this is just really terrific news. And so as part of that, the site will be linked to the Congress website from May 25th to June 30th. So terrific news there. And I think I'll just end. If you have a beverage, toast to everyone. Congratulations. Thank you again for your participation. And I look forward to hearing the presentations and more dialogue later. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Sean. And now I get to introduce our first artistic presentation by Eileen Sobis, drawing and painting at OCAD University. She is joined tonight by 3 students from her COVID-19 responsive art class. Over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. We have a bit of a presentation prepared. So for people who haven't looked at the site in depth, I ran a COVID art responsive class in 3rd year at OCAD University. And it was a cross-disciplinary class. So there were students from all the disciplines of art and design in this class. And I want to talk about why I came up with the idea for this class. And then I'm going to share with you the way the class was designed. And then we have 3 of our student artists here to present their work. And I think you'll be really impressed with the impactful and meaningful projects that they came up with. So first, I'm also going to do a land acknowledgement because I am in Toronto. So this is a picture of the Toronto Islands, which are unceded territory. And this is OCAD University's very special land acknowledgement. So OCAD University acknowledges the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians on the land on which we stand and create. So I'm just gonna go to the next slide. So the idea for this project actually came out of my own studio practice. I was feeling very overwhelmed, as I'm sure many of you were. And when I left my studio, I didn't know when I would be able to get back because the hard shutdown had just started and it was the middle of March. And I just grabbed all the dry materials that I could find, knowing that I wouldn't be able to come back to my studio for maybe a number of weeks. And I was feeling quite despondent. I missed my students, I missed work, and I was on the computer all day. And finally, I went back into my space and I started making these COVID-19 collages. And I turned this into a social project where I would trade donations to the food bank for a collage. So people would make a donation to the food bank and then I would mail them a collage. And it turned into this amazing fundraising project where I started to feel like I was active rather than passive and giving back to the community during a time of large food insecurity. So then I started thinking the students at OCAD would also benefit from responding to the pandemic directly. And so I started thinking through a course where they could, you know, explore these feelings through their studio practice and maybe feel that transformative effect that I also had as an artist. So I came up with this course description and I presented it to my Associate Dean Academic. Through the creation of artwork and reflective writing in response to the COVID-19 global pandemic, students will deepen their capacity to address complex social justice issues in studio practice. Student-driven research and experimentation with various methods of art making created from a home studio environment will be organized into an online exhibition. Discussions will work to build a student's understanding of responsibility and their personal positionality to crisis. Lectures and demonstrations will look critically at how contemporary and historical artists with diverse experiences, viewpoints, and histories respond to crisis in their work. So the way that I designed the course was to have first a whole module just on research. So the students looked at artists who had responded to crisis in the past. So they looked at the Black Plague, they looked at the HIV crisis, they looked at genocide, Black Lives Matter, Idle No More, and different civil rights movements. Then the second module was all about the studio art making and getting feedback from their fellow classmates. And then the final module was really important to the students and myself, that we push the art out into the community through an online exhibition and hopefully give that hope and connection that art can give people during a crisis. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to the students. We picked 3 students to talk today about their work. And the first student is Camille. So Camille, do you want to unmute your mic and speak to your work, and just let me know when you want me to change the slide?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Camille Paget, and I created a work called Sweetness in the Seams for this course. My work is about human connection during COVID-19. Before we come into this world, we become aware of touch, and as humans, we are born into the world to be with people. During COVID-19, relationships of all sorts have been tested. All of us have been tested in a multitude of ways. And so I wonder about our future. How will the coming generations have their human needs satisfied? How will our coming together affect each other? My experience with online courses and working from home has been as bittersweet as my Wi-Fi connection. However, working online also allowed me to have time with my family, and this enriched my work. I chose to paint lovers because I like to focus on hope. I chose to use the color red because of its many outcomes and its driving energy. I chose to paint my lovers being born into this world on red satin, clasping each other because people cannot achieve great change alone. I painted my lovers in transition, allowing viewers to predict their outcome, humanity's outcome. You can change the slide if you want, Helene. And I chose to use milkweed seeds because they too are waiting. The milkweed plant has come to symbolize the broken link between us and the natural world. And I like to think this is a time where we can become more aware of the grand influence nurturing has on one another, and hopefully work our way back toward fixing this broken link.
Thank you. Okay, so the next student, I believe, is Anthony. So Anthony, would you like to unmute and tell the audience about your piece?
Hi, my name's Anthony Magnani. I am an emerging artist residing in Toronto, Ontario, currently in my last year of integrated media, getting my BFA, on track to graduate with honors. You can find some of my work on Instagram under Play2K. The medium I like to work with is digital art with an emphasis on installation work. The themes I am currently working on are disillusion, distillation, autonomy, and concealment. In class, we started off talking about our situation in respect to the history of artists working through a pandemic. We then worked on our own self-directed projects that would later turn into our exhibit, Pathogen 2020. I've noticed my creativity in the pandemic started as an exploratory, continuous loop of ideas that quickly evolved into feeling mesmerized by how uninspiring and isolated this situation really is. Slide. I've noticed that even though we are all dealing with similar struggles, we all have been impacted in different ways, and the light in which we see the pandemic is ultimately informed by our own personal experiences. In my work, I explored the hyper-awareness that exists within the pandemic and how we are paranoid of any sort of muffled voice or cough. The idea that we are in control of our own viral signatures and how we must control or conceal as much as possible, thinking about the personal bubble we have given ourselves and how it becomes tense when leaving the house and entering into a bigger community and the complexities surrounding this phenomenon. I guess slide.
Great. Are you finished, Anthony?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the next person we have is Angel. Chi. So I'll get, hi. So Angel did a video, but what we did was we captured some screenshots so you could get a sense of what the video looks like. And it's definitely linked into the website for this exhibition where you can explore. So go ahead, Angel.
All right, so hi, my name's Angel Chi, and I'm a third year at Oka University in the program Drawing and Painting. And for this piece, essentially, is to focus as like when we rely on technology to keep in touch with our friends and family during this dire time, this piece similarly also makes use of that technology to create a piece that resonates with the artists as well as majority of the population during the lockdown. So the work itself consists of 8 images, which have photographs of myself as a figure, in addition to a few digital illustrations alongside each image. And if Eileen can go to the next slide. So the title 2020 Error is basically sums up what a lot of the year events have occurred, which not only consists of the pandemic, but many major occurrences. Every image is to represent the different stages of the lockdown that many can relate to today. From the beginning, prior to the news that we must go into lockdown and that this was a whole global pandemic, to the uncertainty we all could have felt, such as accepting the coronavirus as a pandemic and that we all need to contribute to lessening the rise in cases, which then leads us to our present time, a whole year passing, coming to terms of like with the new regulations and adapting to the new normal. We continue to proceed each day with extra caution, becoming tired of hearing the news of rising cases or just anxious to hear about the news in general, simply becoming accustomed to the lifestyle as if the cycle of our day-to-day life has become a swirling circle, representing a feeling of drowning into the abyss. The images are compiled into a video, as Eileen has mentioned, as they transition to each other through the swirling and how quickly time is passing. It raises the question whether time is real, and especially with so much time to ourselves now compared to our bustling routine to get to work or school before the whole pandemic. And if there is a next slide, you can go to next slide. Yeah, so you can definitely check out the video.
Yeah, the video it really gives you that feeling of uneasiness and feeling that the pandemic causes of loss of time for sure. So the last couple of slides I just wanted to show is that we decided to use this website called Kunstematrix. And the last module of the course was the students were split into multiple groups to put on this exhibition. So there was a curatorial group, there was a marketing group, there was a press kit group, there was an outreach group, and they all banded together even in the online space, and they were able to put on this really sophisticated, beautiful exhibition in this 3D virtual gallery. And they also decided for accessibility reasons to create a scrolling gallery as well. I'll put these links in the chat after we're finished. And then they were able to push this out. And I just wanted to end by saying that I was so astonished at the level of creativity the students were able to produce. You know, even though they were socially isolated at home, they didn't have access to the studios and the equipment. And there's something to be said for you know, creativity being boosted and being amplified by restrictions. And I think that this show is such a beautiful example of that. And then I just wanted to thank the RSC for organizing this and for allowing the student project to be part of this wonderful exhibition. And then I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful work by Eileen, Camille, Anthony, and Angel. Thank you again for sharing your really thought-provoking work with us. Now I'll turn things over to Christina Haldane. She is a classical soprano on faculty at Dalhousie in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's such a great pleasure to be here, and it's wonderful to see all of you and to hear about these wonderful projects. So the collaboration for my project, ICA, did occur over several regions in our great country. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we were working in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. We also worked in the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, Métis, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We are grateful for the opportunity to work on this land. Now, I'm a classical singer and I've been based in the UK for many years, and I've enjoyed an international career in Europe, the UK, and Asia. And I'm really happy to now be back home, and I'm based in the Atlantic provinces. When the pandemic struck us all in 2020, like many of you, I was wondering about how my activities would adapt to this new normal and to the constraints we were all experiencing. This led me to think about the relationships I had with other artists, because my practice is so deeply rooted in collaboration. I'm really fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to work closely with many composers on the music of our time. I've been able to work on new pieces, do premieres, and contribute to this wonderful musical ecosystem. Now, without the ability to gather, I wondered, how would this be possible? I've also had the opportunity to participate in grand opera productions. Now, opera is very much probably one of the largest performing arts forms because it brings together so many aspects of the theatrical process. So how would I adapt my singing, for example, when we weren't able to gather or even work in these large theatrical spaces? And I was very aware that I didn't want to simply transfer the artistic process of the large stage and bring it into the smaller stage of the digital medium. So this prompted me to reach out to some of my own personal connections. First with my longtime collaborator and cousin, Carl-Philippe Gionnet, an interdisciplinary artist also based here in the Acadian Peninsula. And also to Adam Shurkin, a long-term friend and collaborator, a composer and pianist who works out of Toronto and New York City. Now, as I was discussing with them about possibilities for collaboration, the Canada Council for the Arts launched a one-off micro innovation digital grant. So there's nothing like a deadline. I quickly formed a pitch, threw in my plan, and crossed everything for a positive result. And I was really excited at the end of the July, I got the green light for my project. So the ICAR project is an interdisciplinary musical digital performance residency and product. So the project brings together many aspects of my own creative work. So the aspects of poetry, for example, classical music, voice and piano, composition, and film and visuals. So Carl and I have been working for many years on a collaboration to arrange traditional Acadian folk songs in the classical art song aesthetic. Now that means that the voice and the piano part are independent of each other with regards to their musical lines. Now, we've already worked on 3 of them. Carl is the arranger and he sets them for my voice, and then we workshop them together. This was an opportunity to work on a couple more. So we were looking at 2 new Acadian folk songs, Le Rosier Blanc and L'Étoile du Nord. Now, Adam and I had the chance to work on many other composers' work. We'd never really had the chance to work on anything he had composed for me. So I wondered about that, and I was really keen to finally get a chance to work on some of Adam's music. At the time, Carl was finishing up a narrative poem called Icar, which is due to be published in the spring of 2022 with Prise de Parole. And this seemed to me the perfect link to unite the 3 of us in this new project. So Adam was going to write a piece for me set to Carl's poem, Icar. That prompted us to reach out to Acadian film artist Stéphane Levesque and his sound engineer, Dennis Morton. And these are from Show C14, and they joined our team to help us with production. Now, our plan for Icar was to premiere the piece with our partners at Le Festival Acadien de Caraquet on the 15th of August, which is the National Acadian Festival Day. Now, if you do remember, we got our green light at the end of the July. So, our deadline was actually really tough for working on new pieces. We were planning on doing our workshop and our filming in Caraquet and Saint-Simon in the Acadian Peninsula. Unfortunately, Adam was unable to join us for this collaboration due to the pandemic constraints. So a lot of Zoom calls unfolded, and we were able to really collaborate on the nuances of the piece together. So that was a really new way of doing things. However, we were really surprised at how quickly and sort of exciting that collaborative process could be. Carl and I were enjoying the same family bubble at the time, so we were able to work a little bit more freely. So with regards to our plan, we had our filming dates on August the 6th and the 10th and our workshop the week prior. Many of the visual inspiration for the film came from the place in which we worked, the beautiful church in Saint-Simon in northern New Brunswick. It's got a warm acoustic and feeling and is steeped in Acadian history and also a lot of family history for both Carl and I. Now, the Greek myth of Icarus, from which the name Ikar, our piece, stems, is an interesting one as well, and was a way to tie in some of our artistic process. So Icarus is the young man who flew a little bit too close to the sun, and his wings were burned, and he fell tumbling into the ocean. This seemed like a suitable theme when we were working so close to the ocean in New Brunswick. So when we arrived at the church, we were amazed to see that within it was a fallen angel sculpture. And this image turned into a really interesting link between all the creative ideas that contributed towards Ikar. Now, this journey was a really exciting creative process for myself and my collaborators. In a way, it was an opportunity to mesh together aspects of the old and the new in terms of my own creative process. We really enjoyed putting the piece together, and we hope that all of you will take the time to look at the film that is being hosted so generously by the Royal Society of Canada. Before I leave you, I'd love to just share a couple of photographs from our workshop. So you'll see here, we've got a couple of images of our uniting image, our fallen, broken angel. And here we've got the beautiful church in Saint-Simon, so you can get an idea of the space. And here we've got the necessary break time, of course, socially distanced between Carl, Dennis, and Stéphane. And also we can see the outside of the church in Saint-Simon. And lastly, we've got that mandatory Zoom meet between Carl, Adam, and I, the way we ended up spending a lot of our time. And I'm sure, as you all realize, we're all learning to create in this new way. So thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to delving deep into the website over the weekend. And a huge thank you for the Royal Society of Canada for creating this wonderful way to exchange our art together.
Thank you very much, Christina, for sharing that very interesting journey with us. We're all finding new ways to be creative. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Johanna Householder. She has been making work in performance art, audio, video, film, and choreography for over 30 years. In the fall of 2020, she established a collaborative Zoom practice with veteran performance artist Judith Price. Now over to Johanna.
Thank you, Julia. And thanks also to Sean, Russ, all the other contributors, and everyone who's made this extraordinary exhibition possible. It's been really rewarding and sustaining to feel that art and life can go on. I want to begin by shouting out to my friend and collaborator, Judy Price, who is in Victoria, BC in one sense, but ultimately on the territory of the Lekwungen, Esquimalt, Songhees, and WSÁNEĆ peoples as an uninvited guest. I'm speaking to you from Tkaronto, from a territory described in the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum, a territory that continues to be actively undermined by developers just a few miles from here. The headquarters of Zoom are located in San Jose, California, which is the territory of the Muwekma Ohlone. The present day Muwekma Ohlone tribe is comprised of all the known surviving American Indian lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm calling out these names and places particularly because I think throughout this pandemic, we've all been experiencing the cognitive dissonance that comes from not actually being able to feel the ground under our feet when we're on in the digital world online. And this was in part the inspiration for our work in this exhibition, which is a short video extracted from our ongoing research. Judy and I have had a conventional conversational Zoom relationship for a few years, ever since we collaborated on a project at the Art Gallery of Victoria in 2016, and living as we do several time zones away. But beginning last August, we quite spontaneously started to explore an improvisational practice, probing and exploiting the connectivity proffered by the ubiquitous Zoom and its limitations. We formed a desire to reach around and through the screen. We improvised our research, working through moments of consonance and dissonance, eventually approximating each other's appearance, gesture, surroundings. And by doing that, we began to map potential new relationships and environments. We were learning to read one another's surroundings differently. So I'd like to invite you into a bit of that experimentation. This is just a brief extract from one of the other episodes in this series. We're calling it episode 11, or What's in the Fridge. Got it.
Oh, yay.
Okay.
Actually, maybe.
In the work that is on the exhibition website, Cedar and Bamboo, titled Cedar and Bamboo after the vegetation in our backyards, recognizing that Zoom normally occurs indoors, but at this point we were no longer Zoom meeting. We were trying to stretch the technological boundaries even while we simultaneously understand that online, all environments are backgrounds and all backgrounds appear as virtual. So to extend some of those thoughts, we also remapped other relationships. For instance, we noticed how absurdly we seem to occupy a continuous household. Can you play?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to get it.
Oh, look at that. Ah. Oh, yeah. Oh. Amazing.
Oh boy. Okay. There.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
We are attempting to align our contiguous DVD shelves, you know, that everyone has, could stretch coast to coast. And clearly aligning ourselves required effort and an elusive skill in laptop juggling. I don't know about you, but I've been experiencing a greater than normal incidence of telepathic communication over the last few months. And reflecting on that, and again, on our common ground, I think about mycelium, the almost invisible fungal connectivity under the ground, under our feet. And that it's not only the things that shoot up above the ground that nourish us. So I think I'll end there. Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Joanna. I encourage us to think about continuous households and continuous archives, even with the media. Just wonderful. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for their work. And this is my opportunity to open the floor up to the rest of you for question, answer, or if you have work that you want to share. As I mentioned at the outset, you can go to the reactions button on the bottom of your screen and click the raise hand, and we'll try to call on you that way. Or if you want, you can message Q&A in the chat, and Amelia will take your information there. So I'll just give everyone a minute or two to pause and digest all that we've experienced tonight. And we can't applaud in the normal way, but let's just take a moment to appreciate what we've been able to experience tonight. So are there any questions, comments? Go ahead, David.
Wanting to know from Christine DeVuono about the significance of the mason jars in her piece and the impetus behind it.
Is it? Hi. So my artistic piece, it's a visual sculpture, and it is just so for people who haven't seen it yet, it's 100 mason jars, each of which has a carving made out of ivory soap. And each carving is of an elderly figure, a senior citizen. And it's my response to the lockdown in long-term residential care. There it is. And I used mason jars because they have, not only do they have the vernacular reading of being preservation containers, but also all of them have been reclaimed. They've been donated by friends and family. And so each one gives a feeling of different environments, and that each person, each sculpture is kept in its own environment. So even though they're all preserved, they're isolated. And this work came out of my experience working at the beginning of the pandemic at one of our long-term healthcare facilities, and the experience I had working with residents who were isolated from their communities, their family and friends, and volunteers that were just not allowed in, and the effects that would have on the residents that live there.
Thank you so much, Christine. Over to you, Sarah Diamond has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely inspiring evening and wonderful work. You know, there's a couple of major research reports that have come out, one from Hill Research and the other from the World Health Organization that have, and this is pre-pandemic data, that have shown a very direct correlation between participation in the arts as audiences and makers and really significantly increased health. So the examples that we've seen tonight, again, demonstrate that relationship. And I'm curious, and of course, this is a big question, but maybe with shorter answers. How can we exit from COVID-19 having learned about how incredibly important artistic practice in health and wellness is? That has been reinforced, and then the research reinforces it. So what are some of the things that we can take forward as we begin to emerge from the pandemic?
Does anyone want to take up that question?
I have a thought, and I'm afraid I think your point is so important. My thought, however, is darker, and that is the pandemic has also brought certain economic pressures that we're actually seeing, at least in certain contexts, the opposite of what you're encouraging happening. I know you'd probably know this. So I don't really have a comment except to say I think what you're saying is so important, and as a counter to this tension, it's incredibly important for us to all kind of voice what you're saying. So it wasn't a very helpful comment, but I did want to underscore that I think in a way the opposite is happening, if you get what I'm saying.
I would have a comment too, and that's such a wonderful question, and my comment is not an answer by any means. You know, the pandemic has brought together, you know, so many so many things we fear, you know, life, death, and how those things intersect, and where we are in, you know, within that. And in a way, I suppose our artistic practice, no matter what it might be, as long as it's establishing a connection with somebody else and establishing that human connection, I think that that is something that can give us comfort, although sometimes it can be very, you know, intense and emotional. You know, I find often when I'm, you know, performing certain pieces, for example, you can look out and you can see someone might be crying, for example, in the audience. It might not be, you know, we don't know why those tears are there. However, something in the experience, which is a bit sort of transcendental, has affected them. And to me, I always find that very, very strong. And as a performer, I need to eliminate those feelings before I perform. They often happen in the rehearsal process, actually. My collaborative partner and I, Carl, often say, well, if we haven't cried in a rehearsal, well, you know, if we haven't cried it out here, then it's going to seep out in the performance, and that's when other people get involved. So, but you know, many aspects of what we do are hard to put a finger on, right? And I think it's been hard for us to articulate some of the constraints and some of all the sort of conflicting emotions we felt as a result of the pandemic, and that's to go alongside the obvious atrocities that Sean has been discussing too, you know, that have been very difficult for us to deal with as a society. So I do hope that we can take those, you know, those atrocities forward and find communal answers to them, and keep forming our connections through our artistic practice, whatever that might be, because we never know who we are going to affect in those moments and how.
Thank you for that, Christina. Sean, did you have your hand up?
I did. Just, it was a question for Eileen. It was great to see the students work and to hear the students speak, and I was pleased to hear how, you know, positive you felt the students responded to this time of crisis. And as someone who will also, you know, teaches studio art, I had similar experiences, although I did have the other side of the coin with students really struggling. And I wondered, you know, that side of you know, did that happen in your cases?
Yeah, I think definitely the students are struggling. I mean, being in your 20s and in a pandemic and socially isolated is something that is extraordinarily difficult. But I would say that, you know, I mean, maybe the students can speak to this too, but I think that making the art and meeting once a week and having that kind of goal and focus really helped them to ground themselves, I would say. And some interesting things happened in the class. Like I got emails from students who said they had never made a friend in class before, and now they'd made a friend online in class, and they said they'd never made a friend online before either, and that they were meeting and socially distancing in real life. I also had students comment at the end that this was the most interesting OCAD class I've ever taken. And I thought, well, it's online. How can this be the most interesting class? But I think because everything was so new and they had this goal and this exhibition, and it was very exciting, that it stimulated them in different ways. So yeah, I don't know. Do any of the students want to speak to the kind of struggle that you went through? There's a few of the students from the class here. I noticed in the participants, there's a number of the students from the class.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about how it felt to create in the pandemic. I sort of already touched on it a little bit when I spoke, but yeah, there's just a very big notion of a very big lack of the show and tell element of art, and it sort of takes away from the whole process and sort of yeah, it just stifles it. And on top of all the other sort of circumstantial things going on right now, it's definitely I think uninspiring is really just the word here.
Well, thank you, Anthony and Eileen. Over to Christine.
I just wanted to respond to Sarah's question about how art can and creativity can sort of affect or respond to some of the actions in the world that we're living in right now. And when I was making my piece and was really getting involved in how long-term care, not just in, we hear all about in the news, we hear about how the long-term care facilities, the for-profit ones especially, are having you know, a lot of the problems that have been going on for years are now suddenly at the forefront. And we are seeing a lot of the crises that are happening because of this pandemic. They're all coming up. And for a lot of people in the community, the isolation that we're seeing in residential homes actually have happened in communities for a long time as well. And these are things that that have, as I've been making these sculptures, I started thinking about, and I started thinking about how I would want when if I'm lucky enough to get old enough that I need care, where do I want to be? And this is something that I hope that things like my piece have people ask of themselves, where do you want to be when you're in care? What do you want that to look at? So because of this crisis that's happening and is exposing all the cracks and all the things that seem to have been lurching along quite nicely, a lot of times because family pick up the slack, or there's volunteers, or there's there's friends who come visit and take a lot of the emotional labor on themselves. And that's what's being missing right now, because all these places are locked down. The emotional care is lacking. And I think what we need to look at, now that everyone's looking at how do we restructure this, I think we need to, a piece like mine, I hope, makes people say, all right, well, what we need is we need that emotional care. We need that connection, whether it's a facility with a person who has no family, no living family or friends to come and visit, or it's a person in the community, or it's a person who has family and friends who can visit. So I personally hope that pieces that are shown here and other places like this allow people to ask of themselves, where do I want to be? How do I, if this becomes me, what do I want my society to hold as valuable? And how do we work towards that?
Thank you, Christine. Percy Shelley, the poet, said that the foundation of morality was the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, was to be able to imagine comprehensively and intensely the feelings of others. And it seems to me that that's a large part of what we're talking about here tonight, and what your work does is open up our minds to the situation of others. It's one of the reasons that they also show that fiction, for instance, increases the capacity for sympathy and tolerance. So this is really important work. Are there any further questions? On the public benefit side, maybe I can throw a question out there for everyone. One of the things that I found in terms of dealing with speaking for the arts in larger university contexts where the arts are greatly outnumbered is a general assumption that arts come from talent, and talent sort of springs fully armed from the head of Zeus. It doesn't take work and craft and training and so on. How do you push back against that sense that the arts don't need resources, time, or education because they arise spontaneously from talent? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
It's a tough one. I mean, one thing I would add there, I think it's a really good point, but that it's research, right? That this is an endeavor that requires research and similar timeframes and infrastructure support and all that. So, I mean, maybe that's partly an answer, right? That you need to emphasize that it's knowledge producing in a way too. So.
Yeah, and that's where that phrase creative research is really important.
I would say that it's also important to support single discipline institutions like the art schools. I know in the context of universities, of course, often the art programs are at the bottom of the hierarchy. And so I think we really need our single discipline schools in order to keep pushing that precise message about what is required in order to train an artist.
Thank you.
I mean, I would, sorry to weigh in, I'm not a panelist, but I would just say that in fact, the demands on artists are more profound than ever before. The need for disciplined, focused training, the breadth of skills that are needed, the understanding of context, the ability to use every possible, both technology and their ability to intuitively understand and know the skills that are needed. Never before has professional training been so needed, so critical. I mean, you know, we live in a world of mass culture and, you know, where we're in the world of the selfie, we're in the world of different kinds of data collection. Artists are the people who can navigate us through those spaces. And you cannot do that work without training. You need to be so confident in your capacity to intervene and your ability to build relationships. And we've been hearing all about that tonight. And that requires profound, deep education and discipline. The field has changed. It's not the same training. You know, it is always technical, but it's about a whole other set of disciplines. But we really need professional artists, never so much as in these times.
Thank you for that.
And I would love to weigh in too a little bit about classical music, for example. It's a very specific discipline, and I think there are several things that intersect with it. Absolutely, there's going to be that sort of aha talent that some people have, but that talent needs opportunity in order to be nurtured. And I acknowledge that I come from a position of privilege because I've been enabled to nurture my talent. And with it is a huge amount of devotion of time. And that doesn't come without a socioeconomic opportunity. And it greatly troubles me that those opportunities are not available to everyone who has a talent that they would like to explore. Something like classical music needs to be built from a young age. And it was with me. I came from a background of you know, I've got music in my family, you know, musicians, not necessarily professional ones, but it was always an aspect of my normal growing up. And I know that's not the case for every young person. And so we need a lot more sort of grass upwards with our training and I will not speak for other artistic disciplines, but with classical music especially, we need to nurture those who can, you know, follow that path. So I would say as younger musicians, we need much more for them, our kids, our young people. And then, you know, the training goes forever. I enjoy still training. So it's, you know, that's part of the joy of it. So many hours, many years, we need more resources for our musicians, for sure.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we'll take one more question. Jace?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a comment following up on what other people have been talking about. And just want to put my 2 bits or 2 cents, for you that are too younger to not know what 2 bits are. 2 bits in. It would be a real, it'd be very disheartening if we don't take away from this time period, this pandemic period, into the future, what some other people have mentioned before, how important it is we develop the empathetic approach, and that through our art making, if we haven't learned anything through this pandemic, we've learned nothing. And is that how important it is to work cross-culturally, and especially to collaborate and to reach out to Indigenous partners and to work with people and to help to amplify and upraise their work and their lives as much as we can. I think it's part of a daily practice, and I mean, and we can always do more, but I think it's something that I think we should be conscious of all the time, is reaching out, and that it's our, you know, either settlers or settler descendants, our responsibility to embrace and to collaborate and to make possibilities happen. That's it.
Thank you very much. And thank you for ending us on a really important note that I think has run through this entire event, and that is the importance of reaching out to each other, being connected, celebrating that connection, exploring new ways of connecting around the sorts of barriers that this crisis has thrown up around us, as well as history. We need to take those barriers down. And in that spirit, I'd like to acknowledge that while we had a wonderful turnout for this event, not everyone could stay and not everyone could join us. There are technological barriers. There are responsibilities that people have that have prevented them from participating. So I'd remind everyone that this recording is going to go up on the RSC website, and the COVID Creative website is also there for people to enjoy and to contribute to. Part of building these connections is sharing our voices and our perspectives and listening to other people's voices and perspectives. As we were just reminded, is a daily practice. So I'd like to close by thanking the working group for the creative arts for all of their work. If you go to the RSC website, you can see who's part of that, as well as find a link to go to the website that's showcasing all of this really important work. And I'd like to once again thank Sean for all of his work on the working group as chair and as curator of the site and of this event, and the RSC staff for helping us out, Erica, Amelia, and Russell. Thank you very much. And thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their work with us. Thank you very much, everyone.